Thank you very much, Steve. And yes, welcome to Manchester from the local speaker. This is Salford, this is not Manchester, if you're expecting to be in some shiny building. So yeah, what I want to talk to you for the next sort of 10-15 minutes about is a significant NERC investment in the NERC Digital Solutions programme. So basically this has been a long time sort of incubating in NERC. I think a call came out for applications to bid for this before people had said the words COVID-19. And we went through various rounds of funding, and then we spent 6 months in a scoping phase where we spoke with a lot of external partners about how they might be involved in this programme. And then that finally led to a final proposal to NERC and a bid and an interview, the usual kind of things, and then we were awarded this programme. So it's a 5-year programme. I keep wanting to sort of say 5-year research programme, but in a way it's not sort of research. We're not doing new research. We don't have like a standard aim and set of objectives as you might have in a research programme. We are essentially building a piece of NERC, UKRI, national infrastructure. So although we've got 5 years of funding, at the end of that, before the end of that, assuming we don't make a complete mess of it, we should become an equivalent to like a NERC data centre. So the facility that we are building will go beyond this initial 5 years. So I'll start off a little bit about the rationale for why we're building this digital solutions hub, as we're calling it. Talk a little bit about what the NERC Digital Solutions Hub can do for you and the wider research but also practice community. Because a key point about this is that in terms of NERC's ambitions, the sort of primary user of what we're building is not academics, it's the non-academic community. So we'll talk a little bit about how what we're building can support policy making work and decision making, which is very similar to what we've been hearing from some of the previous talks about how national infrastructure needs to be planned and thought about. Talk a little bit about one of the pilots we're doing. So we're developing some initial pilot projects to go out to the user community and sort of demonstrate the possibilities of what we're going to be doing. And then say a little bit about how you potentially could be helping us build this, how you can get involved through user needs. And also, if you're an organisation or a research group that's got your own data, how can you contribute that to this system, and how can it be connected up with NERC's data to aid your research and decision making? And then explain how you may or may not be able to get involved. I've put questions on there, but I guess we've got the panel discussion at the end. So why are we building this? Well, NERC have got 5 data centres. They're listed here. All under the sort of underneath this thing called the Environmental Data Service. There's also an archaeology data service, which is primarily funded by AHRC, but does get some funding from NERC as well. But the sort of headline a couple of weeks ago I was told that across these 5 data centres there's 40 petabytes of data. Stephen Mobbs, who is the head of the, which one is it? The NCAS, National Centre for Atmospheric Science, then referred to it in a meeting that over 100 petabytes. So I need to ask NERC how much data do they have? Do they even know how much data they have? But they've got a heck of a lot of data. It's in these 5 different data centres, as I've said, and one of the challenges that they've got is that a lot of this data is only used by environmental scientists, and they recognise there's a lot of value in this data, and they want to open that data up to much wider use. And the specific aim overall of what NERC are trying to achieve is open up that data to use beyond the academic community. So these data centres do a great job in curating and providing access to their data. They are all run sort of as separate data centres. There's some collaboration between them, but they all have different types of data. There's different types of formats. Some of the data is provided as sort of like a national service. So things like the UKCP data that's produced by the Met Office gets passed on and sits on Jasmine, NERC's supercomputer. We've got other data for things like British Oceanographic Data Centre that has a lot of data about Antarctica and the Himalayas and ice melt and things. So there's a whole range of different data. What we're finding as well is there's a huge difference in the quality of metadata associated with this data as well. So we find in a lot of the national data sets, the metadata is very good, but where there's maybe data sets being uploaded there by individual research groups and academics, sometimes that metadata isn't in the best quality that you would be expecting. So we've got a bit of a challenge there, and if you know, at the moment, if you want to search for any data, you have to go into each individual data center. So we're looking at how we can offer some kind of umbrella that sits over this that allows you to search across all data centers. So NERC, the EDS, do a very good job at curating this data and making it available to a certain audience. But what we're trying to do is open up that. We're working with a whole range of other groups across. So we've got UK CRIC and Newcastle University. We've got Wizard, which is an ESRC-funded program at Cardiff University. We've got the Software Sustainability Institute involved, Data Labs up at CH in Lancaster, and they've got their Jupyter notebooks that run on Jasmine, so you can do analytics on data that's held within Jasmine. And we've got other partners involved as well as and a range of government departments. But whilst it's they're very good at curating the data, it's actually quite difficult to extract data from their systems. So unless you're an environmental scientist, it can be quite challenging to get data out of those systems, and particularly if you're not in the academic sector. So for those in government, whether that's local, regional, national, and the private sector, and third sector organisations, things like environmental charities that could make use of such data, it's really, in fact, very little use of this outside of environmental science. So what we're trying to do is, as I keep saying, is make this more usable to a range of non-academic stakeholders. And this can range from national governments, from England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and the UK government as a whole, and as I said, the different devolved nations, local government and regional government, and a whole range of quangos. So we've been talking to things like the Environment Agency, Health and Safety Executive, Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, Natural Resources, Wales and others, and a whole range of health agencies as well. So NHS Digital, they keep changing their names, but things like what were Public Health Scotland, Public Health England, civil contingency agencies, about how this data might benefit how they can benefit from using this data and integrate it into their decision-making processes. Also involving third sector organisations as well, anything from the sort of big international agencies like Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace, but also local environmental organisations as well. So there's what we discussed. There's a lot of things like river trusts around the country that could benefit from using a lot of this data to inform their decision making, and also the private sector as well. So anything from big multinationals like Arup down to SMEs and even sort of individual sole practitioner communities. We spent most of lockdown in a lot of Zoom and Teams calls. So we had an initial 9-month scoping phase, talking to, these are just a few of them, talking to these different kind of organisations, from Whitehall departments down to local government and third sector and private sector organisations, to start to understand what their problems might be around how they make decisions and how access to all of this rich data that NERC holds might support them in their decision-making processes. So one of the key reasons that we got this project, as opposed to other what you might say rivals who bid for this, was the fact that we said we would put users at the centre of how we're designing this system. So we didn't go in proposal saying, right, we're going to use your data to build X, Y, and Z. We said at first we will go out and ask users, some of those that we've just shown earlier, what their problems are and the difficulties they face with accessing the kind of data that NERC has. And once we understood what their problem was, we would then respond to that by building some kind of overarching system that would provide easier access to NERC's data, but also, importantly, how we can integrate that data with a whole range of other social, economic, environmental and health data across the whole of the UK. So this could be scalable from looking at things at a very neighbourhood scale, right up to sort of local authority level and right up to regional and national level. So one of the key challenges with, well, grappling with at the moment is when we've got all this, multi-petabytes of data across 5 data centers, how do you provide a single system that efficiently and quickly can respond to a query? So if you're searching for soil data, how is that going to extract that data from one of those 5 data centers? Our software engineers are all sat around a table in the middle of the room, and that's one of the things that they're working on at the moment, is looking at how efficiently can we extract that data and render that in some kind of way of being able to preview that data. So a non-academic user, someone say, for example, in a local authority who's maybe working on a climate change adaptation plan, can interrogate and understand what data NERC might hold and how that might assist them in their decision-making processes. And to do this, we're realising we can't just turn up in a kind of workshop and go, right, what do you want to do with this data? Because their initial response is, well, we've no idea what you're talking about, what kind of data is available. So we'll first of all start off by building a kind of data discovery tool, and then build a set of toolkits on top of all that data within this digital solutions hub to enable them to understand how they might be able to make use of that data to support their decision making. So we're just about to start later this month. Emails just went out, I think, yesterday, around the country to a whole load of public sector, private sector organisations to start initially some online workshops to basically ask how can we support you in the kind of decision-making role that you have. So if you're, as I said, trying to develop a climate change adaptation plan, what sort of data do you use as the evidence base to feed into the making of that plan? And asking them about kind of what could we provide you with, what sort of tools and analytical functionalities would you like to support you in your decision making, and how can what we're building help you support you in your job and your role. So we're building this on 2 generic use cases. One is around what we're calling a climate-ready nation, and this is building on previous work we've done here at Manchester on something called Climate Just. So it uses the UK CP 09 and 08 data. It's a little bit different to what we were being shown earlier by some of the earlier speakers. The Climate Just system is specifically looking at social injustice and the stronger relation. There's a strong relationship between the inability for more deprived communities to adapt to climate change. So it's looking at it more from a socio-economic focus, but relating the environmental impacts and what's coming out of the UKCP analysis and correlating and overlaying and analysing that with socio-economic data. So we know, for example, that Hull is already being affected by a lot of sea level rise and flooding, and it's also UK relatively deprived community, so they've got less financial resources at an individual household level to respond to climate adaptation. So it's slightly different to just looking at things, the impacts of climate as a whole. It's got a specific focus on more deprived neighbourhoods. Another one of our broad use cases is what we call a connected health nation. So that is integrating health data with NERC's data. So one of our use cases is looking at environmental pollution and respiratory illness and the relationship between human health. We're starting off first by looking at Greater Manchester. So one of the challenges we've got here is that as soon as you start using health data, unless it's aggregated, it's obviously extremely sensitive data. And one of the things we've got here in Manchester, for Greater Manchester, is everyone's individual health records are stored in a trusted research environment, which allows analysis to be undertaken at the individual level. Not normally in a lot of sort of health analysis you're able to do your analysis in that way. So we're looking at how, so this is on a technical level, how we can build a TRE, trusted research environment, and then the technical challenge of how do we transport, what do we do? Do we move the compute to the data or the data to the compute? And one of the challenges we've got here is moving potentially petabytes of data that sit on Jasmine and a lot of the NERC data to the health data and vice versa. At the moment, Jasmine does not have a trusted research environment, so how do we do it? And we're talking at the moment with JISC and AWS about how we can be using the public cloud to build a TRE, and then again talking with NERC through their recommissioning of the NERC Environmental Data Service as to how NERC might be able to start building TREs within their current setup. These slides are going to be available afterwards, aren't they? So I won't kind of dwell on this. We're also developing, so I've said about our use cases, so we're looking at those 2 specific use cases and talking to potential users, applying the FAIR principles, which we referred to earlier this morning, so I won't dwell on that one either. But one of the challenges we've got is kind of going to the user community, who are kind of up here. So I'm a town planner. As a planner, one of the problems we've got is building houses, enough houses for people to live in across the UK. And we've been thinking about, well, we're using that as one of our use cases, as going out and saying, well, what will be the environmental impacts in, say, 2050, 2080? If we're going to build 300,000 homes a year, where are we going to build those across the UK? And what might be things like sea level rise impacts, surface water flooding, river flooding, as we go forward? So if planners are starting to think about where to allocate housing sites, are they thinking about the challenges in 20, 30 years' time? And using this as a kind of use case to sort of explore how NERC's data can help support that decision-making process, but also build the platform in a fairly generic way that allows additional use cases to come on board as the programme moves forward beyond the climate change and the health use case. So we've got a lot of organisations involved, so it's not just about the data that is coming from the NERC data centres, but also things like all the different government departments and their APIs, how we can integrate all of those. We're working with DAFNI as well to learn from what you've been doing, but we've got things like Government Actuaries Department as a partner. They're really interested in understanding what are the climate change impacts on the public purse. So there is some case study work at the moment looking at the Calder Valley, not too far from here on the other side of the Pennines, which has been flooding a lot over the last few years, and just trying to get a handle on what's the impact on things like the schools and hospitals in that part of the world. So the key thing to this as well, it's not just about joining all the data together. We do have Jasmine sat behind here, so you'll be able to run analytical models on the data as well. So it's not just a very expensive data portal. There's also, we will be building analytical tools based on what users tell us that they want to be able to do. So it's not just about visualizing data, but also to run models on top of that as well. If you're in one of those organisations, we are moving into a nice, shiny new building later on this year. There will be space in there for technical people and RSEs and software engineers to come and spend time here in Manchester and work with us on developing what we're building, and vice versa for our RSEs to spend time with you. And if this is something you want to get involved in, now is the time to get in touch. You can contact me and others on the team to get involved in our user workshops. The online ones start in a couple of weeks, but we will be running face-to-face workshops around the UK, different regions, different nations, in the autumn. And that's, I think that's my last slide. Yes.
Richard, thank you very much indeed.